Hello everyone, it is me, Cringe Captain 613, reporting for duty. So, in today's video, we're gonna be reacting to, well, you can already see it, obviously. It's Mr. Nightmare, we're gonna react. And for the first video we're gonna react to is excuse me, I have something in my throat. Saliva. 3 disturbing true lighthouse horror stories. And then the other one we're going to react to is 3 very scary true summer night horror stories. And let's see when was the last time I've done a reaction video from Mr. Nightmare before we begin. 3 weeks ago, and clearly you all enjoyed it because I have some comments and it has 8 likes, so clearly you really enjoy me doing Mr. Nightmares. So let's get started. Because you just love my reaction and you just love Mr. Nightmare's videos, I bet. Let's get straight to the point.
My cousin Nate is in the Coast Guard, and he has been for over a decade. He's not the kind of guy to lie or make things up. He's one of the most straightforward people I know. Real grounded and not superstitious, not into horror,
Just letting you know, I forgot to mention one thing. This is a summer themed. I'm doing part 2. Because in my last Mr. Nightmare reaction video, it was about summer themed. If you get the pattern here. And Lighthouse, I mean, this is like a summer themed, right? It's taking place during the summer. Pretty sure I've also seen it. I think this is summer themed still, so let me know if I could be wrong. But still, I'm trying to keep it summer themed, but also, like, of course, reacting to something creepy. Trying to keep it on theme, you know, like, once it hits fall, we'll react to something for the fall. Well, that's if I make a YouTube video still. But other than that, summer themed. Let's go.
Practical guy who likes boats and order. He told me this story in the summer of 2022. I asked him to repeat it more than once because of how messed up it was, and every time, the details stayed the same. This happened back in 2017, when he was assigned to a lighthouse off the coast of Maine on a 2-week maintenance rotation. The place was called Matinicus Rock, and it's way out there. You can only get to it by boat or helicopter. It's nothing more than a jagged, rocky island with a single lighthouse and 1 auxiliary building that stores fuel and maintenance equipment. There is no power grid, no plumbing, and barely any cell signal. The lighthouse itself is automated, but it still requires occasional manual upkeep, which is why the Coast Guard sends people out to it every year or so. Usually it's a solo assignment, but there had been strange electrical failures the year before, so for this trip they decided to send 2 people, Nate and another guy named Russell. The first few days were fine, windy, boring, and repetitive. During the day, they check the beacon mechanics, test the emergency batteries, refill the diesel generator, and scrape off layers of salt corrosion from the metal interior.
Are you a Roblox?
We'll be right back for this advertisement to be done with. And we're back! Let's begin.
Salt corrosion from the metal interior. At night, they'd read, eat simple meals, and kill time playing cards. It was isolation, but it was expected. No red flags. Then, on the 4th night, Nate woke up around 2 in the morning feeling weird. Not sick, not in pain, just like something was wrong with the atmosphere. The air was heavier than usual, and he said it felt like standing in a room right before a thunderstorm, except the sky was clear and silent outside. He sat up and looked around. It was dark, and then he noticed something. There was no rotation from the beacon. The lighthouse was supposed to send out a sweeping light beam every few seconds, Even during maintenance, it was a huge deal if the light failed. He got up and shook Russell awake, and the two of them made their way up the narrow spiral staircase to the top of the tower to see what was going on. When they got up there, they found the gears that rotated the beacon were still moving, but the actual light itself wasn't turning. Something was jammed in the mechanism. It was a large, dark piece of cloth, like a blanket or an old coat wedged deep into the gear assembly. The thing was soaked, covered in a slimy, mossy substance, and it smelled like rotting seaweed and mildew. They were both confused. The door had been locked, and the windows were sealed. No wind or birds. It didn't make sense, so they removed the fabric, tossed it outside into the wind, and went back to bed, thinking it was just some bizarre one-off incident. The next night, the exact same thing happened again. Around the same time, just after 2, Nate woke up and saw that the beacon wasn't turning. They went up and found another piece of cloth jammed into the same mechanism.
Again?
Only this time, it wasn't the same type of fabric. It was smaller. Looked like an old-fashioned scarf or a shawl. It was red, frayed at the edges, and soaked through with what looked like ocean water. It even had tiny crustaceans clinging to it, like it had just come out of the sea. Nate said that was the moment things stopped feeling coincidental. They checked the doors, the windows, the supply closet, but everything was secure. Now they were starting to wonder if someone was messing with them, or worse, if something had gotten into the lighthouse and was deliberately trying to screw with the light. From that night on, they began blocking the stairwell with heavy crates after doing the final check upstairs. They locked the beacon room and the bottom entrance religiously, but on the 7th night, something happened that Nate still refuses to try to explain. He said he was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when he heard Russell whispering from across the room. But he wasn't talking to Nate. He was murmuring to the corner of the room, saying strange, disconnected things, like someone was standing there. Nate leaned up and asked what he was saying, and Russell blinked slowly and looked confused.
If I heard that, call in the Air Force, pick me up. Call in the priest. I have a crucifix in my room, you want to see it? I'll be right back. Just for 1 second. Can you see that? Get out! Anyone whispers to me, you deserve this. Never whisper to me, please. That's creepy. You deserve that. You deserve God. Like, help. This is why I don't get ghosts in my room, because I have a cross in my room. Whew. I'm sorry, I had to.
He told Nate he wasn't saying anything, but later that night, Nate woke again and found Russell sitting at the window, staring down at the rocks below. When he asked what he was doing, Russell said he thought he saw someone standing down there on the rocks the night before, barely visible on the edge of the beacon light. He said it looked like someone was watching them, and then disappeared when the light rotated back. After that, things started spiraling.
If you think you saw someone, and then when the light dimmed onto the rocks, if I heard that correctly, and then they disappear. Oh, honey, you're on an island that's full of being haunted. It's creepy, I know. You want the crucifix? I have it. Do you want it? I'm offering it to you. You want me to get it again? Comment down below if I should give someone a crucifix. I mean, I could go shopping right now and just get you a crucifix. Just send me your address. Just kidding, don't do that. But still, if you want a crucifix, the church got you. The church got you. Or if you don't have a crucifix, or you can't afford it, or you can't get one, then look up an image online. That should work still. Yeah, but still, comment down below if you need a crucifix. I got you.
Russell got weirder every day. He stopped sleeping, stopped talking much, and just stared out the window for hours.
Is that the next Michael Myers? I'm sorry, I had to. Well, because Michael Myers probably doesn't sleep, and he's not very talkative, and when he's not very talkative, I mean, he doesn't talk at all. I think that's what scares me the most. Honestly. People who doesn't talk at all, not a single word or sound, and they just stare at me. I mean, obviously, I haven't had that happen to me, honestly, but if it did, I don't think I'll ever recover from that, because I don't think they're mentally okay. Or if someone was whispering in my ear. I had that happen to me, and I hate it. It gives me the chills down my spine and up my spine. Like, it goes either way. I get literal chills, and I get goosebumps on my skin. Literally, I do. People really love doing that to me. I don't know why. They need help, that's all I gotta say. I'm telling you, I hate the whispering. Unless if we're in the library, or I mean, if that ever exists in the future, or if we were in church or whatever, then sure, we can whisper. I can probably take it, but out in public or something, I don't know. Whispering just doesn't sit right with me at all. For most cases, it doesn't. Ugh. Alright, on with the video.
Nate asked him if he was okay, and Russell would just mutter about noises in the wall or about hearing voices from inside the stairwell. On the 9th night, they both heard footsteps on the stairs. Not the usual creaking from the wind, but real, slow, deliberate footsteps, one after the other, coming down from the beacon room above.
But didn't they say they locked it and blocked it with everything? Locked and blocked? And make sure it was triple or quintuple or whatever secured. I don't know what to feel about this, honestly.
Nate looked over and saw Russell standing at the bottom of the stairs, frozen and staring up. He asked him if he'd gone up there, and Russell just looked at him and said no. Then he asked if Nate had. Neither of them had moved. They stood there listening, but the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was even worse. That night, they shoved a dresser in front of the bedroom door and slept with knives under their pillows. On the 11th night, they were woken up again by the beacon failing. This time, when they reached the top of the lighthouse, the beacon room door was wide open. Not just unlocked, not just cracked open, completely swung open like someone had kicked it in. The wind was howling through, and when they got inside, the beacon wasn't just stopped. It had been deliberately tampered with. The bulb was unscrewed and placed upright in the middle of the room. That thing is industrial grade. You can't just twist it off by hand without effort. Nate stared at it, terrified, while Russell just kept muttering that someone had done it. Then, Nate felt something brush against his back. Something cold. He spun around, but no one was there. Russell had gone pale. He just kept pointing at the wall, whispering that he saw a hand come out of the bricks. They ran back down the stairs and locked themselves in the bedroom. Nate didn't sleep at all. Russell started rocking back and forth in the corner, whispering to someone who wasn't there. The next morning, Nate used the emergency sat phone and called for an early pickup, saying there had been a serious mechanical failure. The boat showed up that afternoon, but here's the creepiest part. When they arrived, the crew asked them about the distress call they had made at 2:12 a.m. that morning, but Nate had never made any call. He didn't touch the phone until daylight.
Wait, what?
The deckhand said they'd received a garbled call that came through with static, and a voice saying something about someone being there with them. Then it cut out. Russell didn't speak the entire ride back. He quit the Coast Guard a few months later, and never told anyone what really happened out there. Nate still does maintenance duty sometimes, but he says he'll never ever go back to Matinicus Rock.
Perhaps it was haunted. That's the vibe, right? Wait, no, it can't be haunted because was it a break-in then? I think it is a break-in. But still, that's creepy.
I love Roblox.
No, you do not. Advertisement. Let's take a break.
This happened during COVID lockdowns. It was around the point of it where everyone was really getting sick of it and going stir-crazy cooped up in their houses with nothing to do. I was single at the time and was swiping on Tinder and just DMing people while watching movies and shows because really what else was there to do on a weeknight during lockdown? I struck up a conversation with some girl I'd been following on Instagram for years. Her name was Sophia. She goes by Soph. We live in Suffolk County, Long Island, New York, about 20 minutes to half an hour from the Hamptons and like an hour from Montauk. We were bored one night and agreed to hang out. She lives like 5 minutes from me conveniently, so I picked her up. We went for a drive to a nearby park that was closed, and we just drank White Claws there. I immediately got the vibe she was a little rebellious, but like in a cool way. She was down to hop fences and trespass and do things like that. There was a mutual connection very quickly, and within less than an hour, she came up with the idea of driving out to Montauk and walking the cliff walk around the lighthouse. Technically, the lighthouse grounds were closed past sunset. I think they may have been closed in general during lockdown, not 100% sure on that. But right away, I said I was down. I like adventures like that. So we finished our drinks and drove all the way out east to Montauk Point. When we got there, she told me to just park in the lighthouse parking lot. I was a bit hesitant about this, but she seemed pretty confident that there would be no security on a random Tuesday night during lockdown in the off-season. I mean, I didn't see any cars in sight, so I took her word for it. She said she'd done this before, even before COVID. We parked and had another White Claw in the parking lot. I would nervously look around from time to time, making sure no security vehicles were scoping the place out, and she would tell me to relax. We eventually started walking over to the lighthouse. Seeing a lighthouse at night so closely and just staring up at it, it's so cool, but it's also a bit eerie. Can't explain it, but there's something kind of liminal about it. Soph led the way. I guess it was a bit out of the way of the actual entrance, just so we wouldn't be walking directly into the light and potentially exposing ourselves. This was my first time ever at the Montauk Lighthouse. She led us straight to the cliffside behind the lighthouse that had a bunch of rocks forming a trail of sorts called the Cliff Walk. We were navigating solely with our flashlights. Maybe there were supposed to be lights on down there, but that night, mostly everything was off besides a few lights by the front entrance and of course the lighthouse light itself. As we started making our way around the cliff walk, being mindful of our steps, eventually, Soph, who was walking behind me now, said my name. I turned to her, and she was pointing her light behind her, exposing someone behind us also on the rocks. With both of us shining our lights over, it was easier to make him out. He was wearing a coat with a hood over his head. He looked like he was a black guy, but we couldn't tell how old or anything else about him. I called over asking if he worked here, and he didn't answer, but he also wasn't moving either.
That was an odd description to say automatically so quickly. But I don't know what to say.
I followed it up with, "We're gonna leave, sorry." I was mostly nervous that it was a security worker or something and that we were gonna get in trouble. But then the guy said something to us. He said, "Y'all wanna buy some coke?" Finding out that wasn't a security guard, but simply a random guy was not a relief at all. If anything, it was more nerve-wracking, because why the hell was this creepy guy following us? Why was he even here? I said, "No man, we're good," and motioned for Soph to keep moving. I let her go in front of me, and we pressed forward. As we walked along, the guy started moving too. He didn't follow up with anything, like, "You sure?" He remained silent, but he seemed to move at the same pace as us. Soph or I would glance back with our lights every so often, and he'd be the same distance away. It was the strangest, most uncomfortable thing. It made the rest of the experience tense as could be. We made it to the end of the cliff walk.
You got a stalker, that's what it is. I'm pretty sure it was a stalker move.
And hurried through the grass back to the car. That guy from before was still following, basically matching our speed. We heard him call something over to us. It sounded like, "Where are you going?" This guy was obviously looking for trouble. I didn't want to instigate anything, so I didn't respond, and I told Soph not to as well. We walked side by side quickly to the car, and that's when we noticed two more guys walking over from behind us as well. I didn't want to run because that would definitely lead to them chasing us, but one of the other guys called something over to us as well. I didn't hear what it was. We got to the car and hurried inside, and Soph and I screamed when we both realized the three guys were right on top of the car now. I locked the car immediately, I swear, only seconds before two of them tried opening different doors. I put the car in reverse, basically the only direction where I wouldn't be hitting any of them with the car. They kicked and hit my car as I reversed out, but they didn't bother chasing us once we were in motion. On the ride back, I know that both of our hearts were racing, and after the adrenaline wore off, we were both quiet. We called it a night after I dropped her off. We ended up hanging out many times after that, and we're still in touch today. But honestly, that night still unsettles me. It was too close for comfort to something bad happening. My friends think it was a gang, Crips maybe. Whatever it was, I have no interest going back out there at night.
Smart move. Smart move. Never go at night. Never. Actually, I wouldn't even go anywhere at night. Okay, that might be a lie. Actually. But still, I wouldn't go out at night for most cases. Because I'm afraid of what anything could happen. I know it could also happen during the day. And I'm not saying it won't, but in the daytime, at least you can see what's going on. At least you can see what's going on. While in the nighttime, it's easier for whoever is messing with you, or straight up a criminal, or like harassing you. They can just get away with it. Oh, that's not good. I guess that goes in the garbage. I'm sorry. There was a tape that just came off on my Raya that would charge for the iPad or my phone. And it's basically a broken wire, but it still works, but it's a bit brokenish. Because the wire is exposed. You know what, let's just get back to the video. I just realized, is there like a fourth story, or is that it? Oh no, it's only 3 disturbing. I thought there was 4. I was like, why is the video so long?
My name is Gregory. This was a story my old friend Ian has told me many times that happened to him many moons ago. I asked him to give me a detailed version in writing recently that he gave me permission to share online because I always found it so unsettling. Ian was one of those guys you only had to meet once to know he was the real deal. 50-something, solid build, weathered skin from decades working in salt air. He worked in marine salvage and coastal infrastructure. Basically, when something broke near the water, Ian was one of the people you'd call to go fix it. But he wasn't just a contractor. He'd been a diver, a ship technician, even spent time doing remote inspections for the government. The guy had seen just about everything, so when he told me this story, I didn't doubt it. Not for a second. He said it happened back in 2013, when he got hired by a small county up in Washington state to do a structural inspection of an old decommissioned lighthouse. The county had inherited the property years earlier and didn't know what to do with it. Developers wanted to tear it down, historians wanted to preserve it, and no one wanted to pay for it either. So Ian's job was simple. go there alone, assess the place inside and out, and figure out whether it was even safe to restore. The lighthouse was on a remote rock island about an hour off the mainland. Not a big island either, just a hunk of stone and dirt, maybe 300 feet wide, with nothing but the lighthouse itself, a generator shed, and some rusted out old scaffolding from decades past. The place hadn't been used in years, and it wasn't exactly a tourist destination. There weren't even any docks, just a little ledge where a small Coast Guard boat could offload someone at high tide. Ian packed light, food for 4 days, a sleeping bag, some tools, a clipboard, and a two-way marine radio. The plan was simple. He'd get dropped off Monday morning, do a full walkthrough by Wednesday, and call in for pickup Thursday afternoon. He didn't think twice about going alone. He'd done this sort of thing dozens of times before. When he first got there, the place was quiet, cold, cloudy, but calm. The air had that usual mix of salt, metal, and decay you expect from something that's been sitting abandoned for decades. The lighthouse itself was tall, maybe 50 feet, built in the early 1900s. It had the classic spiral staircase inside, which led up to the beacon room. That glass lens hadn't worked in decades, but the structure itself was solid. Ian did his usual safety checks, support beams, stair integrity, window fittings. The floorboards on the lower level were warped but walkable. The second floor was a storage room, which was empty except for some rusted metal cabinets. The third floor had a tiny sleeping quarter that hadn't been used in decades. He ended up laying out his sleeping bag on the ground floor near the generator room where it was warmer and out of the wind. The first night was uneventful. It was quiet, like too quiet, Ian said. You don't notice how noisy the world usually is until it's not. There were no birds, no insects, not even the sound of waves slapping against the rocks outside. Just wind, and even that was soft. On the second day, the fog rolled in thick. Ian woke up to a completely white world outside. You couldn't see more than 5 feet beyond the window. He said it wasn't like any fog he'd seen before. It was so dense it looked solid, like a wall, but he didn't think much of it. That area got heavy fog often. He spent most of the day taking notes on the upper stairwell. That's when he noticed the first weird thing.
I took control.
Taking notes on the upper stairwell. That's when he noticed the first weird thing. Halfway up the staircase to the beacon room, there was a maintenance closet built into the wall. He'd tried to open it on day one, but the hinges were so corroded it wouldn't budge. But now it was open a crack. Not much, maybe an inch, but enough that you could tell it had been moved. He figured the moisture in the air had caused it to shift, but he didn't like it. The inside of the closet was pitch black, and when he pushed the door wider, he saw something sitting in the back corner. A wooden box, maybe the size of a lunchbox, and it was covered in a kind of damp moss, like it had been underwater recently.
Ew.
He didn't open it. He just shut the door again and made a note to report it. That night, something woke him up. He said it wasn't a sound exactly, but more so the absence of sound, like everything had stopped. And then he heard footsteps on the metal stairs above him. At first he thought an animal got inside, but then he realized they weren't descending. The steps were going upward. Whatever was in the tower was climbing. He turned on his flashlight and stared at the stairwell entrance, waiting, but nothing happened. Eventually the sound stopped and the silence returned. The next day, he searched the whole place, top to bottom. He checked every room and every closet. He even climbed onto the roof, but there was nothing. No animals or anything out of the ordinary, except that box. It was now sitting outside the closet, halfway into the stairwell, still covered in moss. He said he stood there for a long time staring at it, trying to decide what to do. Eventually, he picked it up. It was heavier than he expected. The wood was bloated with moisture, but the lid didn't open. It was nailed shut. He didn't want to mess with it too much, so he left it at the base of the stairs and went outside for air. That's when he noticed something else. There were footprints in the dirt around the lighthouse. Bare footprints. Not boots or shoes, but bare wet feet, leading from the north side of the building toward the cliff edge and then stopping. The footprints didn't circle back. They were just 10 or 12 barefoot impressions in the mud that ended at a sheer drop into the sea. He said he stood there for a long time trying to rationalize it. Maybe someone had come ashore, but the only boat scheduled was his return ride, and that wasn't for another day. He considered using the radio to call for an early pickup, but the fog was so thick that by then they probably wouldn't even be able to navigate back. He went inside and locked every door and hatch, and then he wedged the stairwell shut with an iron pipe, and he tried to sleep. That night was worse. Around 1:30 a.m., he heard the door to the upper beacon room slam shut violently. He said the force shook dust loose from the ceiling. Then came the knocking. 3 slow knocks on the inside wall of the tower. Not the front door or window, but the wall itself. Like someone standing just inches behind the plaster, tapping their knuckles against the brick. Ian didn't move. He lay there frozen until the sound stopped. When the sun came up, he checked everything again. The box was gone, and the closet door was fully open. At this point, it was abundantly clear he wasn't alone there, so Ian used the radio and called for immediate extraction. The fog was still heavy, but he told them it was a medical issue. They said they'd try to get a boat there within a few hours. He packed everything and waited by the landing ledge. The fog didn't clear. In fact, it apparently got thicker. He sat there for nearly 7 hours, unable to see anything more than a few feet in front of him. The sun was going down, and the air had gotten cold. He heard someone walking behind him in the gravel near the base of the lighthouse, but when he turned around, there was no one there, or he simply just couldn't see who it was through the fog. He ran to the edge of the cliff and stayed there until he heard the boat horn in the distance. They pulled him out just after dark. The deckhand who helped him on board asked why he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Ian told him that the lighthouse was unsafe and should be sealed off. He filed a brief report back at the office. He said the structure was compromised and not fit for entry, but he never mentioned the footsteps or the box. He told me he didn't because he genuinely considered the possibility that he simply was losing his mind in isolation. This was around the end of what Ian sent me in writing. Ian never went back to that lighthouse. He wrapped up his remaining projects that year and quietly phased himself out of field work. Within a year, he stopped taking contracts altogether, said he wanted to focus on dry land from then on. When I asked if it was because of the lighthouse, he just shrugged and said he'd seen enough out there. I pressed him once, just once, about what he really thought happened on that island. He looked me dead in the eye and said something that kind of stuck with me ever since. He said, "Some places are meant to be left alone. They just need time and silence." That was all he'd say. I tried to look into the lighthouse myself a while back, but I couldn't find much. The coordinates he'd scribbled in his notes don't point to any listed structure. The county records mention a decommissioned tower somewhere off the coast, but there's no official name and no accessible history. It's like he was never really there in the first place. And that's the part that unsettles me most. Not what Ian said, but what nobody else ever did. I don't honestly know whether I hope Ian really was just for whatever reason going crazy on that island or not.
Okay. That got me a bit. Okay, so let's just watch one more video and that'll be it. Yeah. Summer nights. Okay. This is gonna be a good one, I bet.
My name is Chris.
And when I say good one, good enough to scare the living out of me. Yeah, let's go with that.
This happened years ago, and it's something I actually forgot about until recently. I was 17 that summer, working nights at a pizza place on the outskirts of my childhood hometown. I wasn't thrilled with it, but with no money and 2 parents who would have killed me for being unemployed, I couldn't complain. It was one of those jobs you take because nothing else is hiring. Slow shifts, sticky uniforms, and a beat-up delivery car that barely made it up hills. At least I didn't have to drive my own car. That would have sucked. Oh yeah, not that this is super relevant, but I do want to mention that the pizza was god-awful, like genuinely terrible. I couldn't understand. Actually, I still don't understand why anyone in their right mind would order from that spot. If not for the technology and relatively nice atmosphere it provided, I honest to God don't think we ever would have gotten a single order. That place is definitely the thing I missed the least about my childhood hometown. And that's saying something. The one saving grace about working there was that because the pizza was so bad, or because the place itself was so far away from our downtown, or maybe a combination of the two, people rarely ordered from us, so most nights were dead quiet. I'm not going to bore you with the mundane details about how my nights typically unfolded. It was a pizza place. I'm sure you could fill in the blanks yourself. One night, I was restocking the fridge with drinks when the tablet buzzed with an online order. Large sausage and olive pizza. I remember that distinctly because we never got olives. The address was out in the middle of nowhere, past the edge of our delivery zone, and I remember getting ready to reject it out of habit. But before I could, my manager, this 30-something guy named Russell, who mostly sat in the back scrolling through Reddit, looked over and told me to take it, saying we hadn't had a single run in over an hour. I didn't argue, so when the pizza was ready, I typed in the directions on my phone and grabbed the pie. At least it would kill 30 or 40 minutes. As I was about to leave the store and walk to the car, I looked a little more carefully at the delivery instructions Russell had printed and stapled to the box, which I hadn't paid attention to until then. They said, and I remember this word for word, park on the street behind the house, walk through the backyard, knock on the back door only. That caught my attention a bit, but my 17-year-old brain thought of several rational reasons why someone might not want me to use the front door. Maybe they didn't want to wake an old person or a young child in the house. Maybe the front door of their house was being renovated. Maybe they wanted to hide the delivery from a parent or spouse. It really could have been any number of things. Plus, all I could think about was how slow the night was, and how much longer it was going to feel if I sat around folding boxes. So I just decided to do my job. But the second I stepped outside, I started having second thoughts. It was one of those summer nights that felt like walking through soup, hot, humid, and completely still, like even the air was stuck in some kind of invisible jelly. I don't know if this will make sense, but there's the stale, sour smell you get when it's really humid and still out. Sort of like old plastic and sun-baked dirt. That's what it smelled like out there. I hate that smell more than anything, but it was unavoidable. I had the windows down for maybe 2 minutes before giving up and blasting the AC. The delivery address wasn't in the direction of downtown. It was actually in the exact opposite direction, even though the pizza place itself was already kind of in the middle of nowhere. The drive was supposed to take just over 25 minutes, but it felt longer because of how empty the roads were. I'm definitely exaggerating a bit. It's not like there were no houses for miles, but it was much less dense the further I drove. When I finally got to the address, I realized I was coming up behind the house. The GPS had routed me along the skinny little side street that ran parallel to a set of backyards. There weren't any street lights, and the houses didn't have back porch lights either. It was all shadows. I remember slowing down and double-checking the house number because it looked totally dead. There were no lights inside and no cars in the driveway, just this sagging backyard with overgrown grass and a rickety wooden fence that didn't even close all the way. But
I would not do it. No. If I had to do that for my job, and if I'm seeing this image right now, like say I'm there right now, and I'm the pizza delivery guy, and this is the first thing I see. I'm sorry. Let me drive back to the pizza place, and I quit. I could never handle something like this. I feel like something's gonna happen. Something bad's gonna happen. I know it. I could already tell. I could already imagine it. Just look at it. Does this seem fishy to you? Do you get goosebumps from this? I do. I have a bit of goosebumps right now, and I feel a little chilly just from this. It's not sitting right with me. I would quit automatically.
still, I followed the instructions.
Even if I was paid extra to do this, no. I'm not even doing it for the money. I quit. Like, I just quit. I wouldn't do it.
I parked right there on the gravel shoulder, grabbed the pizza, and walked up the incline toward the back door. I had the pizza in one hand and my
Don't do
flashlight
it.
in the other, angling it down toward my feet so I wouldn't trip on anything. When I got to the top of the hill, I saw the back door. It was one of those old white ones with a small pane of glass at the top covered by a cheap curtain. I knocked and waited, but no one answered.
That's probably, no one answered. Do you not see what's wrong with this? You've been set up. It could be a prank. Or it could be... You could just, someone's ready to... I don't know. I don't know how to describe the second option, but either way, you've been set up. I have a feeling.
I knocked a second time, knowing that my manager would be livid if I returned to the store empty-handed. After no response, I was about to knock a third time when I saw the curtain move. Not a lot, just this tiny little twitch, like someone brushed it with their finger. It was fast, and I don't think I would have even noticed if I hadn't been staring at the glass. I stood there for another few seconds, expecting the person who was clearly standing right behind the door to finally open up. But before that happened, I noticed two unmarked cars pull up to the side street behind my car. My first thought was that I was about to get in trouble for trespassing or something. One of the car doors opened, and someone stepped out. Even from the house, I could make out that it was a man in the light of the other car's headlights. The guy motioned for me to walk over to him, which is what I did, assuming that he had ordered the pizza and that I had beaten him home from work or something. But as I got closer, I realized he was flashing me something in his hand. It was a badge. The guy was an undercover police officer, which I was able to ascertain because he wasn't wearing a uniform, just normal clothes. As soon as I got within a certain distance of him, he told me to head back to my car and wait there. That was it. That's all he said. So I did. I backed away slowly, climbed into the delivery car, and sat there watching. That's when I realized there weren't just two officers. There were 5, maybe more.
Turning our school project into
No! I want to know what's going on. Stop with this advertisement. Stop. Okay, we're back. Let's see what's going on.
All of them had flashlights, but none of them said a word. They moved stealthily, circling the house like they were trying not to be seen. Not one of them knocked or announced their presence, which I found strange. It was a pretty bizarre sight. I remember one of the officers reaching for the back door handle, the same one I had just knocked on, and gently trying it. When it didn't open, he just nodded at one of the other guys and backed off. It felt like I was watching something I wasn't supposed to see, and I guess I was. Eventually, the first officer came back to my car and crouched beside the window. I rolled it down, and he looked over the pizza box on the passenger seat and let out this short sigh. He was relatively vague with what he told me, but he didn't seem like a tool, just that
Alright, we're back.
he was trying not to say too much. Basically, he said that there was an ongoing investigation involving that property, and that he, along with the rest of the officers, were staking it out. He apologized for taking so long to intervene, and told me that I had pulled up the exact time they were repositioning their vehicles. I asked if he wanted to see the delivery order, and he nodded. I pulled it up on the delivery app, but I could tell it was useless. There was an associated phone number with the order, along with the delivery address and the first name, Jerry, but it didn't seem particularly helpful. The officer read it, took the number down, then told me to leave immediately. I expressed my frustration to him, saying that my boss was going to kill me for returning with the pizza, and the guy just shrugged his shoulders. Then he repeated his instruction for me to leave, and started walking away from the car. I was pissed, but there was nothing I could do, so I drove off. It took me the entire ride back for the whole thing to sink in. I didn't really grasp the gravity of the situation until stepping out of the car. If the police hadn't intervened when they did, something awful could have happened. I don't even know what. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the threat of the police was probably the only reason the person didn't open the door to accept the pizza. But why would someone order a pizza if they were being staked out? Maybe the person inside the house didn't know they were being watched. Or maybe they did, and I was part of some test run. Like maybe I was the bait to see if the cops were watching that side of the house. Or if they left. The curtain moving, the silence, the timing, I don't know. What I do know is that I will never get an explanation for what happened, and thinking back to this incident is mostly a waste of time. I probably would have forgotten all about this if one of my high school friends hadn't brought it up the other week. I didn't even remember it at first. It's probably best I forget about it again, but I figured I'd share it here before that happens. This happened just last year. I'm 40 now, married with 2 boys, ages 7 and 5. I work in insurance, which sounds boring because it is. But we're stable, and that's all I care about at this point in life. A couple years ago, my dad passed away after a long bout with cancer. He left behind a beach house down in Delaware that I had never been to before because he used to rent it out year-round. It's nothing flashy or big, but it's in a fantastic spot, just 1 block off the boardwalk. My favorite part about it by far is the upstairs back deck that provides a really nice view of the ocean. We started going there every summer after he passed, using it as our escape. A week here, weekend there, it became our little family tradition. As much as my wife and I love spending time there, the boys love it even more. They'll spend hours on end playing on the beach, riding bikes, and exploring the town. It feels like a gift, something my dad left behind for us to enjoy. This story takes place during one of those weeks last summer. We'd gone down in mid-July, a Sunday through Friday kind of thing, when the crowds would thin out midweek and the beach was a little quieter. I remember the night clearly. It was a Wednesday. The boys had knocked out around 9:30 after a long day in the sun, and my wife and I were sitting on the back deck, playing cards and sipping wine. That's when our older son, Jordan, came outside. He had this uneasy look on his face. He told me he kept hearing a scratching noise in his room, and it was keeping him awake. I glanced at my wife, then set my glass down and stood up, telling him I'd go check it out. I told my wife to hang tight. I figured it was probably just generic house sounds. It is a pretty old house after all. The boys don't share a room, so I figured there was no need to wake our younger one. I followed Jordan downstairs to his room, and he pointed to the wall near his bed and motioned for me to be quiet. We both stood there for a while, and I didn't hear anything at first, but I didn't want him to think I didn't believe him, so I stood there a little while longer. After maybe 20 seconds, I finally heard it. Faint at first, but definitely there. A soft scratching sound, just like he had described. I crouched down and pressed my ear to the wall. It didn't sound like an animal up in the rafters or anything. It sounded like it was coming from inside the wall, lower down and closer to the baseboards. That's when I heard it. Breathing. Not an animal, definitely not. It was deep, slow, human breathing. I flinched back and let out a sharp "Jesus Christ," without even meaning to. And then, I'm not kidding about this, I heard the most guttural and angry scream I've ever heard ring out from somewhere inside the wall. It caught me so off guard that I yelled out again, a feeling of existential dread hitting me right in the face. I grabbed Jordan by the arm and yanked him out of the room. We ran down the hall to get my younger son, Scott, who was still sound asleep. I didn't even give him a chance to open his eyes. I just scooped him up in my arms and ran. I needed to get back upstairs to the deck where my wife was. That was the only other thing on my mind at that point. As we reached the base of the stairs, I yelled for her, and then I heard another scream come from somewhere behind me, only much closer this time. I turned around and saw a man, covered in filth, charging down the hallway straight at us. I nearly tripped trying to get up the stairs with both my sons, but we made it upstairs and onto the deck just in time. Not 2 seconds after I slammed the sliding door shut, the guy hit the glass full force. I genuinely thought it would shatter. He started clawing at the door like an animal, shrieking and pounding, all the while yelling things I can't bring myself to repeat. I threw my body against the door and yelled at my wife to grab the kids and call the police. She grabbed them and covered their ears, pulling them back from the scene. I kept my eyes on his, trying to block the view of him from my family. He was wild, completely unhinged. His hands smeared something. Dirt, blood, I don't even know. He smeared it across the glass as he banged and tried to force the door open. I don't know how long I held it shut. A minute, 5, it felt like forever. He seemingly had unlimited energy, because it took all my strength to keep that door shut, and he didn't let up once. All I could think about was protecting my family. I was fully prepared to fight the guy if the glass broke, but before that happened, the police finally showed up. They must have come around the side, because within seconds, I saw 2 officers inside the house running at the guy who was still banging on the door. One of the officers tackled him from behind, and the other one helped restrain him. The rest of the night was a blur. After getting that guy out of my house and in the back of a police car, the officers asked me for my version of things, which I told them. Together, the 3 of us inspected the house to try and assess how that man had been inside the walls and how he had gotten out so quickly. Turns out, the house has a crawl space I didn't know about. There's an entrance underneath the back porch that you wouldn't know was there unless you were looking. From there, it leads into a standing crawl space that runs alongside the foundation and has a second access point through a loose panel in Jordan's closet. I had no idea it was there. I'd never done a full inspection of the house when I'd inherited it. Hell, I didn't even bother refinishing it. A few days later, I got more information from a detective who called to follow up. He told me the perpetrator admitted that he'd been staying in the crawl space for months, that he had discovered the crawl space entrance during the off-season, and was planning to harm my family that night for intruding on his, quote, new home. Apparently, the guy had been stealing food from both our house, which we somehow did notice, and our neighbor's trash bins. We didn't go back for the rest of the summer, not out of fear of something else happening, but out of trauma. I didn't want to bring my wife or kids back there for a while, and they didn't object. I hired a crew to seal off the crawl space completely, and once that was done, I was finally able to relax a little. We've been using the house again this summer, and I'm glad to say that things are back to normal, or at least as close to it as we're gonna get.
At least that guy got caught. Yeah. If I was in that family member, I don't know what to think about that situation. I don't think I've ever want to go back there. No.
I grew up in a kind of rural area where you could ride your bike for miles without seeing another person. Like a lot of people, my favorite season was always summer. It still is, actually, but it's been a while since I lived out in the country, so summer's lost a little bit of its charm. A lot of what made summer so special to me is tied to life in the middle of nowhere. There was something about the warmth, quiet, and emptiness I loved, something I could never find in the city. It's hard to explain, but I just felt so isolated, but in a good way. Like I had my own little corner of the earth, all to myself. Like I could disappear for hours and no one would know. Summer nights were always the best. The darkness added to the feeling of privacy and freedom that the little girl I used to be craved. I was 16 at the time. I had a friend back then named Taylor. She was a little more reckless than me, always pushing the limits in small ways. One random night in July, we decided to go stargazing. Just us, 2 bikes, and a bottle of wine. It wasn't the first time we had done something like this. Actually, it's something we did quite often. That is, until what I'm about to tell you happens. Come to think of it, this was probably one of the last times we went stargazing together. We didn't have a specific plan, just a direction. We wanted to go somewhere new, since the old spots were getting a little repetitive. Taylor said she knew a good spot past the edge of town, some abandoned stretch of farmland where nobody ever would bother us. It was sometime around 10 o'clock when we left. I'm not sure how long we biked, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 30, but we didn't stop until we were past anything even remotely civilized. At some point, Taylor just stopped her bike abruptly and told me we were here. I wasn't really sure what here meant, since there were no descriptive landmarks around, but it still felt perfect. Wide open field, no buildings, no fences, no cows, just a huge patch of grass and the endless starry sky. We spread out a blanket and popped the cork with the little opener Taylor had somehow remembered to bring. It was some cheap red wine that didn't taste all that good, but it did the job. We laid there for a while, passing the bottle back and forth, pointing out the few constellations we remembered by name. Our goal on nights like this was always the same: try and spot a shooting star. At one point, Taylor asked me if I thought we'd actually see one, and I told her probably not, but to keep looking anyway. They're not as uncommon out in the country where you can see so many stars, but you still have to pay attention. Shooting star or not, though, we were having a great night. The wine was definitely doing its job, and I started feeling myself slipping into drunkenness. It was the kind of night that made you feel like time didn't exist, kind of like what I was talking about earlier. This isn't super relevant to the story, but it's one of the few things I remember about the night, so I'm going to quickly tell you anyway. There was a very brief moment that felt like a blip in the rhythm of the night. We were leaning back, and Taylor looked at me in this way that made me wonder if she wanted something more than friendship. Growing up, I always had that suspicion about her, but it was never motivated by anything more than curiosity. But that night, it felt a little stronger than I could recall it ever being. I didn't ask, didn't say anything. That kind of thing just wasn't talked about openly where we grew up. And besides, maybe I was just tipsy and reading too into things. Either way, it passed. We laughed about something dumb she said, and then looked up just in time to catch a shooting star streak across the sky. If anyone has ever seen a shooting star, they know the uncontrollable reaction it elicits. Like, you just can't help but laugh or shout something out into the night. The two of us giggled, and Taylor told me to make a wish. I don't remember what it was, probably something silly. We leaned back and talked for a few more minutes, our moods a little uplifted from seeing the shooting star. I closed my eyes for a moment, not to fall asleep, just to feel the breeze on my face for a second and settle further into the stillness. I swear on my life, my eyes were not closed for more than 5 seconds. But when I opened them, Taylor was gone. Like, gone. Not just off to pee or fiddling with her phone. She was actually gone, which I could tell from the fact that both she and her bike were nowhere in sight, even though mine was still sitting right next to the blanket. I sat up fast, thinking maybe she was messing with me, but even after turning a full 360, I couldn't see her. In that moment, I felt this unexplainable feeling of fear wash over me. The empty field I was sitting in suddenly felt suffocating, and the gentle charm of the night was replaced by panic. The stars looked dimmer, that's the part I can't forget. The sky was still there, but it felt off, like someone had turned the brightness down or smeared something over it, and the air felt colder too. Not like it had cooled naturally, but like I stepped into a different version of the same place. I know I'm not making any sense, but like I said, the feeling was unexplainable. I pulled out my phone to check the time. It was 3 a.m. exactly. That timestamp is burned into my memory, and probably will be forever. I had to blink a few times to make sure my mind wasn't playing tricks on me. It hadn't even been midnight just a few minutes ago. I kept staring at the time on my phone, wondering if I had somehow fallen asleep. I knew I hadn't, but I couldn't be sure. Would Taylor really leave me there all alone, though, even if I had fallen asleep? There was no way. She wouldn't have done that in a million years. I stood up, spun around, and called her name a bunch of times, but she didn't answer. I didn't know what to think. The only logical explanation was that she had ditched me for some reason. Maybe she'd gotten annoyed or wandered off and left me passed out, but I couldn't figure out why. We hadn't argued, and the vibe had been good, really good, honestly. I called her phone a bunch of times too, but those were unanswered as well. After that, I started crying. I mean, can you really blame me? I didn't know what else to do. I grabbed my bike and started pedaling back towards my house, trying not to panic. That ride felt like it took forever. It was probably the scariest I'd ever felt on a bike. I didn't stop until I made it back to my driveway, completely out of breath and still not understanding what had just happened. I went to sleep immediately. The next day, I texted Taylor first thing in the morning, expecting an apology or at least an explanation, but instead, she demanded one from me. She asked me word for word, "Where the hell did you go last night?" I told her what I remembered, how I'd woken up alone at 3 a.m. and assumed she'd left me, but then she hit me with the thing that made me send the story in. She said she was the one who had woken up alone at 3 a.m., and I was the one who was gone. She waited for me for over an hour, then biked home angry and confused, assuming I'd gotten annoyed and left her there. According to her, I just vanished, and I was just as convinced the same thing happened in reverse. We went in circles for a bit, trying to piece it together, but nothing added up. Neither of us had memory gaps beyond that moment. Neither of us had texts or calls or anything that could help reconstruct what actually happened. Even though both of us swore remembering calling each other after waking up, none of those missed calls were in either of our phone logs. Eventually, we dropped it. Or at least, we stopped talking about it. But I think both of us were far more terrified than we wanted to admit. I know I was. For months, I'd find myself lying in bed, looking out my window at the stars and remembering that night. Taylor and I didn't stargaze much after that night. Maybe once or twice. In a sense, things did go back to normal. We continued living our lives, and that was that. But even now, I still have no explanation for anything that happened that night. I wouldn't call myself superstitious or a believer in the paranormal, but everyone I tell this story to immediately attribute it to something unnatural. And maybe they're right, but I really don't like thinking about that. I do consider the possibility that she simply lied to me. Either way, I get a really unsettled feeling, like something happened to us that night that I'll potentially never figure out for as long as I live. I haven't heard from Taylor for years, but I'd bet my life on the fact that she too still wonders from time to time about what happened to us that summer night in the field.
I'm gonna say she was trying to lie to you and trying to pin a blame on you, and she was just not a good friend. And now you haven't talked to her in years. That's more of a horrible friendship. And she's trying to make you look crazy. She's trying to make you feel like you're the crazy one. How is this part of a scary story in the video? There's things I don't understand, honestly, but I guess we reached the end of this video, so I don't know what to say. I have nothing to say. No. That's all for today's video for reacting to Mr. Nightmare. So I hope you all enjoyed. Subscribe to my channel, like the video, and comment down what you think of each story I've listened to on 2 different videos. Tell me which one was the scariest and which one you enjoyed the most. To me, I'm gonna say I think the lighthouse one got me. The summer night horror stories, maybe like the first one. Actually, it's either the first or second one where we heard about the crazy guy living behind the walls and then coming out to try to hurt the family. That one got me the most, but the lighthouse one, pretty sure that would have gotten me too. Oh, and also the pizza delivery one. Wait, that was the first one actually for this video, the summer night horror stories. So in this video, the first and second one got me, but the third one we just watched about the friend Taylor and then whatever that name was. I don't understand how that's scary, honestly. So honestly, yeah. I hope you all enjoyed, and don't forget to share the video with friends, family, or loved ones, and share my channel also. I would appreciate that. And I will see you all next time. Bye.